Hello, Editing Christina here with a quick intro at the very beginning of today's video. In today's video, I'm going to be introducing 3 new stamp sets to you from Colorado Craft Company. These are all 3 illustrated by Chris Lauren, and they are holiday themed, cute critters, a cat, a fox, and a bunny. I had to think about that for a minute. I'm like, wait a minute, what did I color? So I have 3 cards for you, 1 for each stamp set, and they're super fun. On the projects themselves, I'm going to be doing watercoloring with new markers from Karin. So they sent their all of their new Realbrush markers to me. I mean, as far as I can tell, they are essentially the same colors as their original line of markers. However, these have kind of like a real brush tip on them. So they're just a little bit of a different application. I'll get into some of those details on how they differ from the original Brush Marker Pros when it comes to the coloring. I also wanted to alert your attention to the fact that there are some giveaways going along with this like launch of the 3 new stamp sets. So make sure you check out the details down below. Also, Colorado Craft Company has free shipping days on Sundays and Mondays. So this weekend, Sunday and Monday. And yeah. Lots of fun things happening with this release from Colorado Craft Company. And a big thank you to Colorado Craft Company for sending these along to me. They emailed and said, hey, would you like to be the sole person introducing these stamp sets? And I said, count me in. I'm all for it. So Christmas in July, we're going to do some Christmas cards today. Hope you enjoy, and here we go. The 3 stamp sets that are being released today from Colorado Craft Company are 3x4, and each of them feature a cute little critter dressed up for the holidays. This first one has a kitty and all the elements, kind of like the clothing elements you can pop on top if you'd like. The dies cut out all those elements as well. The next stamp set is called Bundle Up Bunny, and this cute little bunny in a snowsuit makes me think of that scene from A Christmas Story with the pink little snowsuit. I'm not going to be painting my bunny pink today. I'm going to actually paint it purple, but it's super cute. And the last one is called Nutcracker Fox. Has this really long kind of greeting stamp that kind of explains a little bit about having a nutcracker around Christmas time. So I really want to make sure I use that on my card today. So those are the 3 stamp set. Of course, there are coordinating dies for each one. And I'm going to start out by doing a little bit of mirror stamping with the cat from the Cutest Elf stamp set. So first I'm going to stamp it just normally onto some watercolor paper. This is Fabriano Artistico Extra White. And I stamped it a couple of times to get really solid black lines with my VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And now I'm going to do a mirror of that cat so that I can have 2 cats on my card. And I want to use the coordinating dies. So in order to do that with the mirrored cat, I need to die cut first. And I'm actually going to be kind of stamping the cat on the back of the die cut. So when I die cut my watercolor paper, I made sure to kind of do it in reverse and die cut like the back of the paper. I'm now using a 4x4 grip mat from Waffle Flower. This is going to help me with my mirror stamping. So I've removed the foam pad out of my MISTI, and then I'm putting that grip mat directly down onto the grid on my MISTI. I then stamped the cat stamp like as if the grip mat was paper. I'm just using that same VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I'm going to stamp down onto the grip mat. And this is going to allow me to take the negative area of my watercolor paper that I already die cut. I'm going to place that right over the top. And then when I do my mirror stamping, I can puzzle piece that die cut back in. And we only want the ink from the grip mat to be transferred to my little puzzle piece watercolor die cut. You'll see that in a minute here. I'm going to ink up my stamp image one more time just to make sure that that ink is nice and juicy on top of that grip mat, and then carefully puzzle piece this in right from the bottom. and I'm using my fingertips to press that paper onto the grip mat, and that transfers the ink lines from that image onto my watercolor paper. So because the watercolor paper is very textured, I needed to do this twice. And that was about all I wanted to risk, because the more times you stamp it, the more chances you have of accidentally shifting that little puzzle piece die cut within that negative area, and then you won't have a nice crisp image. So I picked it up with my tweezers and pulled it right out of that negative space, and I had some pretty solid lines. I'm going to clean up the lines with a black waterproof marker, but here you can see I've got a mirrored kitty and then the original kitty. Okay, so now I'm going to clean up my grip mat. I used a baby wipe, but it didn't take off all of that ink. So then I used some Ultra Clean stamp cleaner. Simus's Stamp sells some, so does Hero Arts. It's essentially the same cleaner, but it basically will take all the ink off the grip mat. You can also use that same cleaner on your stamps. Like I said, I used a waterproof black marker just to fill in some of those lines, make the lines a little bit more dark like the original cat. So I'm going to be using the Realbrush Pro markers. These are the water-based markers. They also have some pigment-based ones that have the same brush. But essentially you can see they look pretty much like the original Karin markers, except the brush tip has changed. Even inside the box, the colors have the same numbers, the same names, and they're actually in the same kind of order in the box, which is great because I have a swatch sheet from my other marker box that I can use for this one as well. So you can kind of see the brush tip on that. It's a little bit different. If you're familiar with Zig clean color markers, it's a similar kind of like filament brush tip. So here's my swatch chart for my other box that I continue to use. So I'm going to use the swatch chart for this box of markers as well. So I did use a little bit of tape on the back of my kitties, on the die cut one and also the original, just to keep those in place. And you do see a little faint whisker on the mirrored cat. That's just because the ink wasn't dry and I pressed it down with my finger and it kind of messed it up. So I find that these markers, for the way I'm using them today, behave very similarly to the original Brush Marker Pros. If anything, there's a finer tip on the brush tip on these Realbrush markers, and I think you get a little bit more ink out of that brush tip at its very finest point in comparison to the original. But other than that, for today's application, these are pretty much the same. So I'm going to turn on a little music and continue the coloring.
Oh, the lilac snow, drifting down so soft and slow outside my window. I watch it go. Oh, the lilac snow. And though the world may seem so still, it's coming in a distant chill with the memories of winters past, of the ones I wish would have lasted. Oh, the lilac snow tells secrets of long ago, of carols sung, of gifts we've known. Oh, the lilac snow whispers softly on the wind as memories come flowing in. Oh, oh, once the candles on the tree glow, softly lighting up the lilac snow. Then the quiet of the winter night was filled with wonder and pure delight. Oh, the lilac snow tells secrets of long ago, of carols sung, of gifts we've known. Oh, the lilac snow whispers softly on the wind as memories come flowing in, as the lilac snow falls alone.
When it comes to die cutting these images out, I don't trust my magnetic mat. It was a little too important to make sure I got these cut out perfectly, so I did use a little bit of some yellow tape from Spellbinders to hold that down. I also put a piece of scratch paper over the top, and you can see that the black lines, even though the ink was dry, did transfer to that scratch paper. So I recommend doing that when you're die cutting images that you've used VersaFine Onyx Black on. I'm going to do the same thing with the other two images, tape them down, put a little bit of that scrap paper right over top, and then run it through my die cutting machine. And I definitely needed it for these two images. Look how much ink transferred onto that paper. So I'm popping these out. They die cut beautifully. The edge of the metal dies lines up with the line of the stamped image. So it was really easy to get these perfectly positioned for die cutting. All right, so I'm going to move on and create the rest of the cards. I'm now working on the background to go behind my two kitties. So I'm using this blue shade, and I'm only going to use one marker for this entire blue background. But you can see how versatile these markers are, because depending on how much water you have kind of moving around, you can get some lighter shades and some more intense areas. I think it worked really, really well. I think especially when you're kind of applying the marker directly to the paper like this, I think you have less like really dark spots where the marker just sits. I think it's a little bit easier with these Realbrush markers. I mean, I could be wrong. I might need to do a side-by-side comparison, but that was my first feeling when I was kind of using these. Did a little bit of gray for below that background, and then I put my cats on top to make sure they were the right size. I stamped a greeting from the stamp set in VersaFine Onyx Black, and then die cut this down to be the exact size of an A2 card. Now, I used a VersaFine again, so I did put some more scrap paper in. A good thing I did. It saved my cutting plates. I then adhered my watercolor piece to a card base, just using some tape runner adhesive, and then I adhered my cats with some foam adhesive. For the last little bit of details, I added some white gel pen. They could be snowflakes, they could be stars. We're not really sure. Could be just magical sparkles, but that finishes up my first card. For my second card, I'm going to be using a circle die set from Simon Says Stamp. This is the nested circles, and I wanted to have the little bunny kind of coming outside the circle, and I wanted to have a lot of space around the bunny to have some snowflakes. So the first thing I did was I die cut my circle out of some white cardstock. This is an A2 sized card panel, by the way. Then I took that circle that I cut out and I just drew with a pencil on some watercolor paper so that I could paint a background and have it be larger than that die cut circle window. I used 4 different colors of markers, kind of like some lighter shades of a pink, purple, blue, and yellow. I did 1 layer of watercolor just to get the color down, and then I came back over it with a second layer, kind of overlapping those colors to get a little bit of a little more interest. After that dried, I cut it out with my scissors just so it was a little bit easier to handle. And then I took a couple of different die sets from Simon Says Stamp. I used the Grace Snowflake and the Snow Flurries. These are snowflake dies that I've done in the past. And I cut those out using some pixie dust cardstock from Lawn Fawn. So back to my card base, my folded card base, I adhered my circular watercolor background. And I just kind of placed that watercolor behind my die cut window so I could get placement on the card base perfectly. I then adhered my snowflake die cuts on top of that watercolor background, and I kind of alternated between putting that die cut circle window on top and kind of seeing where the bunny would be positioned, just to try to get a good idea of where these snowflakes needed to be. You could also just go ahead and kind of assemble the card, even put the bunny on, and then add the snowflakes later. In that case, you would just need to make sure that you cut the snowflakes that are going underneath the edges of the circle window. I kind of placed everything in my MISTI and then removed everything except that die cut window panel. And then I stamped the Stay Cozy greeting from the stamp set in that same VersaFine Onyx Black ink, just right on top of that die cut circle panel. I then put some foam adhesive on the back of that panel and put it directly onto my card front. And I just lined those edges up the best that I could and then pressed those together. For the bunny, I put foam adhesive on everything but the bunny's feet, and I put a little bit of glue on the feet. That's because the feet are hanging outside that circle window, and so I wanted everything to be pretty flat. To finish off this card, I added some black dashed lines right around that circle window. I think the black lines really tie in the line work on the bunny and also that greeting, which is black. So there's my second card. Super cute. I love this one. Very non-traditional holiday colors. For this last card, we're doing very holiday colors. I'm using the Make It Merry 6x8 pattern paper pad from Honeybee. I've grabbed this really pretty plaid. I thought the reds in the plaid worked really well with that rich red on the fox's coat. So I cut some black cardstock. This is Hero Arts Pitch Black. And I'm actually going to be making this into a mini slimline card today. And I chose that size in particular so that I could have this really long sentiment talking about the Nutcracker and have the fox Nutcracker off to the side of the greeting. When you use that positioning, it's the perfect size for a mini slimline card. So I stamped and heat embossed with some gold embossing powder. This is gilded embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. And then cleaned off any of that anti-static powder just with a microfiber cloth. I then picked out a red cardstock. This happens to be pomegranate from Spellbinders. I thought the red matched that pattern paper really well. And I stamped a greeting from My Favorite Things Itty Bitty Christmas stamp set, just have a magical Christmas. And I used the same gold embossing powder for that. I trimmed it down to a really skinny little strip and then started to assemble my card. I first put some tape runner adhesive on the back of that plaid pattern paper, and then I adhered that black embossed greeting as well, just right on top. I then grabbed some gold cardstock. This is actually from Sizzix. This is their opulent gold brushed metal cardstock, and I trimmed that down to two very skinny little strips that I adhered below that black greeting and also above the black greeting. For the red little sentiment strip, I cut some little ribbon ends on each side and then put some foam adhesive on the back. I put some foam adhesive also on the back of the Nutcracker and adhered the Nutcracker to the right side of the card and then put that little red sentiment strip right above the large black greeting. Trimmed off the excess of those gold strips, and then here are my 3 cards for today. So cute. I love how these turned out. Just a reminder that all 3 stamp sets are available over at the Colorado Craft Company website in their shop. I'll have links down below. You can click right over and purchase those. And there are giveaways of the stamp sets and also gift cards and things like that. So check out all the giveaway details down below as well. Thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you all in another video very soon.
Outside my window, I watch it go. All the lilacs know. And though the world may seem so still, it's coming in a distant chill.